Most women who are seriously considering divorce don't know the full picture of their finances yet. And I say yet because you will if you follow my advice in this podcast. It's not an accident that you don't know your finances in a lot of situations, especially if there's a situation in your relationship where one person is more financially engaged or where there's an imbalance, like financial knowledge becomes even. Sometimes it's subtle, but sometimes it can be deliberate. Some partners will keep you out of your finances to keep control of you too. That imbalances is one of the most effective things that keep women in marriages that they want to leave. Today, we're going to talk about money. It's so uncomfortable to talk about money, isn't it? But we're not going to talk about it in like this vague, like, get your financial house in order kind of way. I want to talk about some specifics about how to start today and little things you can do now and start building toward full financial clarity in your life. Financial clarity is not just empowering, it's what makes leaving an unhealthy relationship possible. Hold on, I gotta get Alice. Alice cries if I don't pick her up. So here's my little doggy, Alice. Oh, Alice. It's okay. Welcome back to Breaking Upward. I'm Rachel Newhouse. A quick note before we get into today's episode. Nothing in this podcast ever is legal, financial, or medical advice. I'm speaking from personal experience and general information. If you need really specific information on your situation, please work with licensed professionals who know your case inside and out. With that said, let's get into it. I want to start by naming something directly. Knowing what's in your financial accounts, meaning, understanding what assets you have, gathering documentation about your own life. These are not betrayals of your marriage. It's not sneaky. It's not underhanded. It's information about your life that has impacts on your life now and in the future. You are entitled to that information. If any part of you is hesitating to get your financial information because it feels disloyal, it's okay to notice that because it can feel uncomfortable if you have been in the dark about it, but you do need to set that aside. You have a right to this information legally. Nobody can keep you away from your financial information legally, and you need to set those feelings aside because this is important for your future. Gathering information about your own finances is not betrayal. It's self-preservation. You're entitled to know what's in your own marriage. So let's start with what you need to gather. Before anything else, you need a really clear picture of what your household actually has. So I want you to pull together at least the last 3 years of joint tax returns. I want you to get your bank statements for every account, joint accounts and individual accounts for at least the last 6 months, preferably for the last year. I also want you to have all of your retirement accounts for both you and your spouse, investment accounts, same thing, both of you, and pension information. You also are going to need your mortgage statements, deeds to any property you own, and documentation on any real estate. You are going to also need a full list of all of your debts, including credit cards, loans, car payments, anything you owe to family members. Also, if you have any business interests, you want some documentation of those too. I also want to say that yes, you're going to need financial information in your divorce, but this isn't about going after your spouse. You're not doing this to build a case. You're doing this to build your life. You're doing it because you need to understand your own financial life before you can make intelligent decisions about it. You need to know what you have before you can decide what to fight for and what to concede, and what leaving actually costs too. Start gathering your documentation now, quietly if you need to. If you're worried about your spouse finding them, keep copies somewhere they don't have easy access to. I'm not all about encouraging people hiding these, but if you're really worried about if you're really worried about that, if you're in a controlling situation, if you don't feel comfortable about it, it is okay for you to have your own place to store your own financial information. Okay? I'm giving you permission. All right, now let's talk about your marital property. This concept matters pretty enormously, and most people don't understand it until they're in the middle of divorce and their lawyer tries to explain it. So I want to help you plan around that before it's too late. So generally speaking, all of your assets and debts that are acquired during your marriage, those are considered marital property, regardless of whose name is on them. unless you have a prenup. We're not talking about prenups here. Like if you have a prenup, this changes everything in a lot of ways if your prenup is super specific, okay? This is general information. So regardless of whose name is on the assets, if they were acquired during the marriage, they are joint property. So if your spouse has a retirement account they've been contributing to throughout your marriage, you likely have a legal interest in a portion of that, even if your name is nowhere on this account. It also means that debt accumulated during the marriage is often shared responsibility, even if only one of you ran the debt up. The court doesn't really care about that. The specifics vary significantly by state, so you need an attorney to tell you what applies to your situation. But understanding this concept changes how you're going to look at the full picture of what's on the table. So let's also talk about credit. This is so important. I'm going to say this one is actually urgent, and I really want you to treat it that way. If your primary credit cards are in your spouse's name, or if you've only been an authorized user on their accounts rather than a primary account holder yourself, your independent credit history may be thin or non-existent. I had a friend go through this and it was devastating for her. She's so financially responsible. She had stayed at home with the kids for many years and her husband put all of the bills in his name. He paid all of the bills. He put their car in his name. He put their condo in his name. Everything was in his name. I mean, everything. She went to look at her credit so that she could apply for an apartment so that she could leave. She had a credit score of 0. You can't get an apartment. You can't get a car. You can't finance anything on your own if you don't have credit. So if you're just in the beginning stages of thinking of leaving your marriage, or even honestly, if you're not thinking of leaving your marriage, if you're in a happy marriage, build your own credit. Everyone should have their own credit, and especially before anything is filed in court. Open a credit card in your name only if you don't have one. Use it for small purchases. Pay it off in full every month. This isn't exciting, but it does work and it's super effective and it can be a really important tool. It was one thing too, because I had heard of this with other people not being able to go off on their own when my current, or I call him sometimes my latest husband, this is my second husband now, but when we got married, he was like, oh, should we join our Chase Sapphire Reserve credit cards? And I was like, absolutely not. Like, I will keep my credit cards. You keep your credit cards. We have our names on different accounts because we're both continuing to generate our credit. I had fear of that from things I saw other people go through. So I just made that choice in my new marriage. I had the same arrangement in my old marriage as well. We had our own credit cards, but I was especially wary of it because of what I watched my friend go through. To sum it up, if most of your credit is in your spouse's name, your independent credit history may almost be non-existent. This affects your ability to rent an apartment and start a new life. So start building your own credit now before you file anything. Let's also talk about the types of divorce. And it does have financial implications, so I want to talk about that. This is where the financial picture changes depending on what path you're going to take and which type of divorce you choose. Well, sometimes you don't choose it. Sometimes your spouse forces you into a certain type, which is unfortunate. Most people don't know that they have a choice. A lot of people think there's only one way to get divorced. There's not. There's many ways to get divorced. Contested divorce means that you and your spouse can't reach agreement on key issues like assets, custody, support, and a judge is going to decide for you. This is the most expensive path, and I know firsthand how expensive that can get. My initial divorce was more of a collaborative divorce, and then our post-decree stuff, so after our divorce was entered, every single thing has been contested since then, and we spent tens of thousands of dollars fighting in court over things we had already agreed to in our divorce agreement. It was so unnecessary, but this is the most expensive path. And I will also say, to me, it felt like the most vulnerable one. When you leave it in a judge's hands to decide for you, you don't have as much of a say in what's going on. Sometimes it's necessary because you cannot get a person to work with you on anything. So I'm not saying it's your fault if this is the path you end up on. But I do think, if I had to give my layperson's recommendation, I would avoid this kind of divorce if you can. If you can't, I understand that too. Been there. There's also something called uncontested divorce. This means you agree on everything before filing. This was what me and my ex did when we actually got divorced. We agreed on everything before we filed. We still went through the legal process, but it was much simpler, much faster, and it was very cheap. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I think our entire divorce cost like less than $4,000, which I think we're married for 9 years, 8 or 9 years, something like that. With a child, that was incredibly cheap for it. Now, the post-decree stuff, again, that's where our bills ran up. But the uncontested divorce, we agreed on everything and came to that conclusion. It was awesome to do it that way. Now, collaborative divorce means that you each have an attorney, but you both commit to negotiated resolution rather than to litigation. So this means there is a person helping you with that, without giving. So it keeps you out of court while giving you professional representation. Another option is mediation. Mediation is that a neutral third party helps you and your spouse reach agreement. The mediator doesn't represent either of you or make decisions. For cases without serious power imbalances or safety concerns, this can resolve a divorce in a fraction of the time and the cost of full litigation. I said we had an uncontested divorce, and I would say it was uncontested, but we did use mediation to get to an uncontested divorce. So we chose to use a therapist to do that with us. Some people use a lawyer. I felt like this was just a big emotional thing. Him and I had been together for, I always forget how many years, 12 or 13 years or something like that at that point. It was a long time. We had a kid together. We had a big life together. We were very enmeshed in each other's families. And so I felt like emotionally, it was better to use for us a therapist to get through that than it was to use a lawyer. To help us work through some of the emotions that went with that too. So we did come to resolutions, and then we had that uncontested divorce. I also want to, be honest that I made financial concessions in my divorce specifically to get out faster. To me, I had things in my mind that were non-negotiables. My time with my son was non-negotiable. I was not negotiating on that. I'm not going to get into why, but I wasn't going to do that. So if I could secure my son in his future in a lot of ways in the best way I could, that was like the thing that mattered the most to me. We had certain financial things in there. I didn't go backwards in finances very much. I didn't get into his retirement accounts or investment accounts. I let him have them. And we had some accounts that I felt like activity in them wasn't right and that the court could have ruled differently on, but I let it go. I let some of these things go because speed and getting what I thought was the most important was worth more to me than fighting over every dollar. I'm not saying you should take that advice. I'm not even saying that's advice. I'm just saying that's what I did. That was the right call for my situation, but it might not be for yours. The point is, know your options before you walk into an attorney's office so you're not defaulting to the most expensive path out of ignorance. I will also say this too, out of experience. There are amazing lawyers. My lawyer right now, I swear to God, she's an angel sent from heaven. I adore her. I love her. I would trust my life with her, my child's life with her. I think she's incredible. She's calm. She's smart. I love working with her. I recommended her to all of my friends who are getting divorced, and they've all had a good experience with her too. But my lawyer is not every lawyer. There are lawyers who do like to drive up the cost of litigation because they make more money off of litigation. They don't make money off of no conflict. So I would be really careful to not go for a high conflict individual because you don't want to be enmeshed in conflict. You also don't want to be avoidant either, somebody who's just scared of conflict. So, find a happy medium. That's what I would do for myself. But for you, maybe you want a bulldog who's just going to go aggressively at things and run up bills and whatever. Like that might work for you. But I do think mediation and collaboration exist. So not all divorce needs to be full courtroom litigation. Mediation and collaborative divorce exist, and they can save you tens of thousands of dollars. So know your options before you assume you're headed to court or before you just commit to that pathway. Now I'm going to tell you some things not to do. I'm not a big rules gal in general. I think we all need some guidelines, but I think there's a lot of gray in life. But I do think some of these things are mistakes that are common that have real legal consequences. So the first thing I would say is when you are making agreements, follow them. You can't expect your spouse to follow them if you don't follow them. Follow them to the T. Know your legal documents inside and out once they're done, okay? You need to know what's in them, and you can't violate them. You are escalating conflict if you are violating your agreements. It's as simple as that. You are causing conflict every time you breach your agreement. So that goes for you, that goes for your ex, that goes for everybody involved, okay? Another thing is, do not drain your joint bank accounts, even if you are the one who earned the money. The judges can notice these sudden account activity, and your ex certainly is going to, and it damages your credibility to do that. It's going to damage your case. So just leave things alone and continue business as usual, unless you get different advice from your lawyer or a financial advisor. Also, I do not recommend hiding assets. If that's discovered, there are forensic accountants who are specifically hired for this. It'll damage your position and potentially expose you to legal consequences. Judges are human beings, and they see human behavior and they look at patterns in behavior. Do not give them a reason to think that you are not trustworthy. Another one is, don't make large, unusual purchases before filing. One of my friend's exes did this. He went out and bought a car and did all of these things, and she didn't actually hold him to it, which I was like, you need to hold him to that, but don't do it, because the financial picture at the time of separation matters, and unusual activity, it's going to leave you vulnerable, okay? Then you're at the mercy of your ex and the court, and you're just lucky if they don't nail you for that, okay? All right, so now we've got those rules covered. Let's talk about paying for an attorney. What if you're in a situation where you can't afford a traditional attorney? This is not a dead end, okay? I know that can feel very panic-inducing to see the prices of lawyers, and people can be like, then I can never leave. I've heard people say that, and it's not true. You still can. It's not a dead end. There's legal aid organizations that provide free or reduced cost family law services to people who qualify. Right? So start at your state bar association's website. Many law schools run family law clinics where supervised law students can handle real cases at no cost, sometimes very low cost. And there's also something called limited scope representation, which is that you hire an attorney for specific defined parts of your case only, to review a settlement agreement, coaching you for a hearing rather than full representation. This might cost you a few $100s instead of tens of thousands of dollars. And then that helps to get professional eyes on those moments that matter the most. Okay, I know how hard it is to think about spending money on an attorney. I've done it, and it makes me want to vomit when I get bills from my attorney. It's not a good feeling, but it is important that you are represented and that you have legal eyes on it and that you don't make concessions that you don't have to make. There are women who stay in marriages because they believe they can't afford to leave. I want you to remember resources exist, okay? Resources exist. Use them. Legal aid, law school clinics, limited scope representation. There's no shame in going any of these pathways. This is self-protection. Don't let the cost be the reason you don't protect yourself, and don't let embarrassment or shame be the reason that you don't ask for low-cost resources. Protect yourself. Protect your kids. Whew, all right. I know this is a lot. This was dense. Save it. Play it again if you need to. Come back to it for the specifics. This financial piece of divorce is where a lot of women feel the most lost, and that doesn't have to be you. Next week, we're going to talk about kids. The question I asked myself more than any other when I was thinking about getting divorced is, am I going to ruin my child's life by doing this? We'll get into what the research actually says about that and what to tell kids at different ages and what will actually harm them. And it's not what most people think. If this was useful, share it. I'm Rachel. This is Breaking Upward. I'll see you next week.